Hi, everyone. So this week we are studying Majid Majidi's masterpiece, The Willow Tree. Bid Majnun in Persian. Bid Majnun is the word for willow tree. It has a little bit of a connotation that it doesn't in English because Majnun means demented or crazy, describing the tree. But anyways, Bid Majnun, The Willow Tree. This film is, in a way, this course's centerpiece. The library could not get it for me. And I emailed them immediately and told them, actually, if there's one film that I absolutely need, it's this. This is the most important film in the entirety of this course. So what they did is they found a version on YouTube. I put that version online for you. I've also uploaded a version of the film for you, which I'll actually have to take down after this week. So you'll just have the YouTube version. But for now, take whichever you prefer, whichever looks better. I guess it's no surprise to tell you that Majid Majidi is, in fact, the director that I mentioned before, the mystery director that I've studied and written 2 articles on, which is unusual for someone in my field. I study classical Islamic mystical poetry, Sufi poetry. Usually people who study classical Sufi poetry don't write about contemporary cinema. But when I saw these films, I immediately realized that there was something that had to be said. These films actually take classical Sufi poetry and apply them to the modern world. So in a way, they are the perfect example of what it means to define and encounter modernity, right? I even have plans to write more about Majid Majidi. So important is he. So I'll try to make this brief, but this might be one of my longer lectures. Please make it through the whole thing. If you need to, do ×2 speed. That does not offend me. But please watch this whole video because I'm going to break down the film and offer my analysis. This is just my opinion or my analysis, but I have evidence. And I hope it will help you see how you should be analyzing these films throughout the course. Okay. Majid Majidi is an Iranian director. He came on the scene in the United States in the mid-90s when he was nominated for an Oscar. First Iranian filmmaker and film to be nominated for his film Children of Heaven. Bachaya Osman. Highly recommend you see that film. He did not win, but since then a different Iranian filmmaker did win the Oscar, was nominated also for Best Screenplay, and we'll be watching that film in class. Anyways, his films use a style called neorealism. In his case, and in the case of another famous director, it's called Iranian neorealism. Neorealism. Why neorealism? Neorealism is a cinematic term that is most famously associated with Italian neorealism, a type of film that involves long shots. So if you think about like when you watch a Marvel movie or an action movie, shots are very quick, a couple of seconds. But in a neorealism film, they're long gazes, long views. They usually involve mundane, everyday figures, a baker or a street sweeper or just a normal person. In Majid Majidi's version of neorealism, they often involve children, people with disabilities, downtrodden, poor people, but with long shots, focusing on their life. That's the style of his film. So you'll notice immediately when you watch this, the pace is slow, very slow, but it's saying something in that pace. It has a message. The most famous Iranian neorealist director, unfortunately, we couldn't fit him into our course, is named Abbas Kiarostami. Abbas Kiarostami, if you Google him, you'll see he's a doyen of film studies. If you study film at a film school, you will learn about Abbas Kiarostami. He's a very artistic, avant-garde director. Other directors who love his work are Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino. People will be watching it in this class. But we couldn't get to him. We're doing Majid Majidi. Majid Majidi has one thing that Abbas Kiarostami doesn't have. In Iran, they refer to his style of filmmaking as spiritual cinema. Okay? Spiritual cinema. Why do they call it spiritual cinema? Cinema manavi. They call it spiritual cinema because his films not only try to address concerns about people who are like refugees, foreigners, disabled, children, poor. They also try to show how there is an encounter with the divine and throughout our lives. And you'll see that in this film too. And that's where the Sufi poetry part comes in. So let me just say one quick thing about Sufi poetry, and then I'll get into this film, into my lecture. When I say Sufi, I'm talking about a movement within Islam that started, I would say it started around, let's say, in the 800s, 900s, and eventually became something where you would go to a teacher, could be a man or a woman, who would train you to interpret life in a way where you could know God better. And that might involve practices like repeating God's names. It might involve observing Islamic rituals in a different way, in a deeper way. It might involve reading texts in a deep way. Out of it came a lot of writing about the meaning of life, how to know God, what the Quran means, how we can interpret the life of the Prophet Muhammad in a very deep spiritual way, right? And the most famous poet, I would argue, that comes out of that is a poet named Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, who was born near Balkh, Afghanistan, but moved to what was then called Rome, which is now in Turkey, Konya. And Rumi's poetry is, if you have never heard of him, it's by far the most famous Sufi poetry out there. He wrote in around, let's say, the 1200s. Now, this is the interesting thing. I am a professor at the University of Central Florida who studies Rumi and classical Persian Sufi poetry. The protagonist of this film, Yusuf, is a professor of classical Sufism who studies Rumi and Sufi poetry and all that. Fascinating for me, at least. But that's what he studies. And so Rumi's poetry pervades the film. That usually when Yusuf, the professor, the blind professor who's the protagonist of this film, usually when he's dealing with some sort of book in Braille, especially at the end of the film, it's Rumi's famous Masnavi, which is a long poem of spiritual wisdom that he's dealing with. I told you there was a lot. So there you go. Not only that, but to understand how this is an encounter with modernity, you have to understand what it means to be Iranian. So I'm going to give you a bit of background. Bear with me. This is a lecture, but hopefully you'll learn something from this. Okay, so here's some slides. Okay, The Willow Tree: Shadows and Light, Form and Meaning. I have chosen this title for a really good reason. Shadows and light. Who talks about shadows and light? Plato, right? When he tells the story through Socrates of the cave. The allegory of the cave, as you saw in our reading, or as you'll see in our reading, the Silverstein reading, is an important part of Western thought, right? If you had to summarize the story of the cave, how would you do it? I would, in simplest terms, it's that most people are living in this cave, and the things we deal with are shadows. Shadows created for us that don't really capture the light. They just kind of use the light to create something false. Some people leave the cave, see the actual light, and then when they come back to us, can tell us about the light. Those are the philosophers. Those are the wise ones, right? So in Plato's view of the world, there's some great truth, right? That kind of it's up there. It's out there in the universe. And then it kind of is downgraded until we get to the material realm where human beings live. And this is the realm of fake things, shadows, lacking reality. Really, what we should do is keep going upward and go back to the true light that's out there. Okay, that's the crux of Platonism, in a very simplified way. Well, that kind of thinking was prevalent in the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia. It was prevalent outside of Greek thought. I mean, in fact, you see it in Zoroastrianism, which pre-exists it. But it makes its way into Islamic thought as well. Now, in Islamic thought for Sufis, they will talk about form and meaning. Meaning, as we'll see, as I'll get to these in the slides, is what comes from that light. It comes down to us, but it comes to us trapped in these forms. Everything we see around us has some meaning. We just have to get behind the form to encounter what God's trying to tell us through that thing. I'll give you an example. Um, let's say I see a beautiful bird, right? It's beautiful, it's colorful. That's the form of the bird. I can just enjoy it and leave it at that. Or I can even do worse and take a picture of it. That's a form of a form. Or I can do worse and draw a picture using that picture and then tweet that. And now we got a form of a form of a form. But if I want to go to the meaning of that bird, what would I do? I would contemplate, what does this bird mean? Oh, I see. This bird was made, in this way so that it could live its life. It's embodies God's mercy, for example. This is the religious way of looking at it, and it symbolizes freedom, flight, going to your homeland, which is God. It symbolizes the beauty that I see in that bird. Actually, reflects the perfect beauty of God. You see how when you go to meaning, you're going through, you're going beyond form. Okay, that's a key theme in this movie. Another key theme in this film is the gaze. The gaze. What's the gaze? The gaze is something that Western philosophers have been thinking about recently. We did a reading on it. The other reading in this course is on the gaze. The gaze is our engagement with reality. Our sense of sight has been both in Western philosophy and often throughout the world, certainly for Muslim philosophers, the sense of sight is the king or queen of all the senses. It is the highest sense. It's the most immediate. You could hear news or hear somebody's voice, but when you see them in person, then that's true. That's the closest to truth you come. Okay. So the gaze for phenomenologists such as Heidegger, in the article, has to do with the most complete way that we can engage with presence and being. I'll leave the reading for later, but I want to say the gaze is a very important part of this film because the film is about a person who couldn't see and then can. What does he do with the gift of sight? Okay, I promised you background. Let me get to background. I have to make this super fast. Okay, you don't know anything about Iranian history, but I have to tell you just a little bit. If I were you, I would screenshot this because I'm not going to go through each point, only to tell you that when we're talking about modernity, there's a reason why in Iran, modernity is such an interesting topic artistically and a difficult one. Okay. Iran had, after the Mongol invasions in the 1200s, a series of first warlords and then kings. And then at a certain point, encountered this new thing that was all the rage in Europe, from the 1700s and onward, called democracy. Well, Iranians wanted a democracy and tried, as you can see on this timeline, tried 2 different times to establish a democracy. But both times were thwarted by other powers, okay? I'll skip the first one just because we don't have a ton of time. I'll go to the second one, which is very important. So when in the 50s, Iranians finally established a constitutional democracy with a prime minister, they also wanted to nationalize oil because they said, well, it's our oil. We should make money from it. Which shouldn't be foreign powers, especially England, the UK, profiting from our oil. Well, we now know, and this is not a conspiracy, this is openly known, that the MI6, which is the British intelligence, and the CIA staged a coup and got rid of Iranian democracy and brought in the son of the previous king, the previous Shah, and installed him. Why that's important is Iranians before had some hope that they would have a democratic country. But at that time, if America is against you having a democracy, then what hope is there? That was the thinking. So people sort of lost hope. The other option was Marxism and communism at that time. And many Iranians went in that direction. And there was another option called a third option, which is what if we went back to Islam, our religion, and had a religious government? Well, the religious people and the Marxists got together and had a revolution. And because the religious authorities were more powerful They were more connected, especially to people outside of the city, but really throughout. They were connected. They had a lot of power. They were able to take the reins over the Marxists. And so you got a government that was established as anti-Western and also anti-Eastern, anti-communist, but only mostly in words. In a lot of ways, there was sort of like, it was a socialist nationalist movement as well. But I don't want to get into all that. Only to say that then Iran becomes, after it becomes sort of anti-Western, and there's a hostage crisis, it becomes more and more isolated. There are sanctions, so American companies are cutting off Iran. Iran is cutting off itself. Internet is censored. So you can't. If you're an Iranian, there's a lot of things you can't see, and so it becomes this kind of weird obsession with modernity as a Western phenomenon. So that tradition is Iranian and modernity is let's say American or European or Western. And where you see that in this film is when Yusuf gets his sight back, try to think about the kinds of women that draw his attention. It's not his wife, poor lady. What kind of women are distracting his gaze from what he should be looking at, which is the signs of God all around him, to beautiful women, just the forms? Well, to me, they follow a certain pattern that we see in the work of the artist and photographer Shirin Ali Abadi. Shirin Ali Abadi is a brilliant, brilliant artist. She has a series of works called Miss Hybrid, which picture Iranian women kind of in exaggerated form of what you would see in Tehran at that time. This was about, I think, 10 to 15 years ago. It was stylish for women. I mean, there are some people who are naturally blonde in Iran, but it's not incredibly common. And there are some people with blue eyes and a lot with green eyes, but again, not incredibly common. But very often people would wear, women would wear blue contact lenses for blue eyes or bleach their hair blonde and sort of feign a kind of Western Western style. And a kind of nose jobs became very popular. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but you might have like bump in the nose even for the sake of just having nose jobs. So just wearing like it was a status symbol for a while. Some people, as you can see here, I think each of the women except one that she depicts has has tape indicating a nose job. What's being said here? I'll leave it to you to interpret, but it's not meant. I don't think it's meant to be comic. I think it's meant to show a kind of longing and a kind of identity crisis. Okay, that's where the modernity angle comes in here. The West in this film, if it appears anywhere, appears in its obsession with materiality, its obsession with form, its obsession with external things, its complete lack of spirituality, right? That's modernity, and that's the West. It's the television that Yusuf stands in front of and is mesmerized, right? And as Yusuf becomes more and more obsessed with form, you see in the film that he becomes more distanced from loving real things. So, for example, well, let's get to it in a second, but you saw who he falls in love with if you've seen the film. I mean, eventually he's looking at her picture. And then at one point, toward the end of the film, which I think this is the most genius scene in the entire film, I didn't take a screenshot of that one. He's riding a motorcycle. He's riding in the car, and he sees on the motorcycle a person with a mannequin on the back, and he's just staring at the mannequin. What is a mannequin? A mannequin's not an attractive thing. It's a really poor representation. It's an absolute form of a form of a form. It doesn't even really look like a human. It's just an outline. But he's obsessed. He's become obsessed with form, and he's totally lost his grips on meaning. How did he get there? Okay, I promised you an analysis. I'm already at 20 minutes. I have to wrap it up. But let me just focus on, I'm just going to focus on four important scenes. And I'm going to give each one like 1 or 2 minutes. So it's going to just hang in there, okay? I'm not supposed to do the lectures this long, I know. But just give me one time, okay? The film begins in utter darkness, indicating that our protagonist is indeed blind. Okay, it begins in utter darkness. But think about what's going on verbally. You hear him talking. Who's he talking to? God. Once he gets his, and those conversations continue throughout the film until he gets his sight back. Once Yusuf gets his sight back, those conversations with God are almost over up until his repentance at the end. So here he is. It's true that he's blind, but in a way he can see things that no one else can see because he has this incredibly intimate relationship with God. Okay. Next scene, immediately, what do you see? He and his daughter, they're racing two sticks. They put them on in the water to see which one will get to the end faster. What happens to Yusuf? Yusuf's stick. And I should tell you here, I said Joseph on accident. Yusuf's name comes from Joseph. And if you know the Bible, like the Quran, the Bible, they both have the same story of Joseph. This is Joseph with the coat. Joseph is abandoned he's almost murdered by his brothers. They leave him in a well, but he's redeemed at the end. He's saved at the end. Okay. I won't get into details. You look up the story if you're interested, but that plays a part in this film too, the story of Joseph. What happens to his stick? It's supposed to go from one end of the stream to the other, but what happens? It gets stuck in the middle. What does that represent? And you have to look at this film that way. Everything is allegorical or metaphorical. The sticks getting stuck in the middle of the stream is like him getting stuck in the middle of his midlife crisis, right? He's getting stuck. He was on a spiritual trajectory toward God. He's going to get stuck. He's going to have a problem, okay? I'm skipping the surgery. You've seen the film. You don't need a summary. I want to just focus on some important scenes to help you think. Now he has his sight back. I've skipped a lot of the film. He comes back. He's greeted by people who've heard his story, many of whom are blind. This is, by the way, based on a true story. But the person ended up suing the filmmaker because he didn't. I think you see why. So he comes back and he sees all these people. He's never seen his wife before. He's heard her voice. He's felt her. He knows who she is, but he's looking around for his wife. That's his support. That's the love of his life. He called her an angel. And in this important scene, think about what's going through his mind. My wife is an angel. She's the most perfect person on earth. She loves me more than anyone, and I love her more than anyone. Therefore, in his very simple mind, simple insofar as him dealing with forms for the first time, I must be looking for the most beautiful person in this crowd because she's the most beautiful person in the world. I know that. She gives everything for me. You see how she takes care of him. So he's looking for a kind of congruity between form and meaning that doesn't exist in the world where we live. In the world where we live, someone could be beautiful on the inside and not the most beautiful person in the room on the outside. So when he looks for his wife, his eyes settle on, I'm sorry, I took a screenshot and she was kind of moving, so it's a bit blurry, on Patty, who's let me think, she's a family friend, but I think I can't remember exactly how she's related to him. Has to do with his uncle. But anyways, I think it's his uncle's, I think it's his uncle's wife's sister, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, a younger woman, certainly. And fits in a way a little bit. Do you see the Miss Hybrid theme? All the women he looks at in the film have that Miss Hybrid theme going on that I was talking about. She embodies the congruity between form and meaning that he's imagining. So he stares at her and immediately falls in love with her, right? And of course, he sees his mother, whom he recognizes because he had sight as a child, and his mother redirects him to his wife. Okay, I won't go through the rest of the film. I want to show you one more scene, and then I'm done. But I want to point out two things that are from the Rumi's work, the Masnavi, that are incredibly important to understanding it. One of them is this. These are lines from the poet Rumi. What is the peel? He's talking about something like a walnut. What is the peel? He says the words we use, multicolored words, like lines drawn on water. When you draw lines on water, they just disappear. They're meaningless, not lingering. Words are like that. Think of this speech as a peel. Don't focus on my words as utterances. Think about the meaning that's in them. Meaning is the pith. Pith is like when you break a walnut. If you've ever, I'm really into nuts. So you break a walnut, you get the inside, what you really want. That's what you're after. This speech as a drawing, meaning as the soul, right? Speech is just a drawing. But if you have a piece of clay or a drawing, it's meaningless until something breathes life into it and it comes to life, right? That's an important theme here. Form and meaning. Meaning and form. Okay, here's another one from Rumi, Masnavi. Pass by the goblets of form. Do not stop there. The wine is in the cup, but it is not of the cup. In other words, when you have wine in a cup, if you start to think, oh, this is the wine, it's shaped like this. The cup is, let's say, green or whatever, and so the wine looks green. You're getting confused. You're obsessing with form. You're not realizing that what you want is inside. Knowledge of God, intimacy with God, presence with God, that's what you want. That's the correct use of the gaze. Use your gaze to see God everywhere. That's the meaning. The cup is the form. These are the things you're interacting with in life. Okay, last scene, and then I'm done. Okay. The film ends like this. He's repented. He destroyed all of his books because he hated his former life. And he goes and he gets this Braille version of the Masnavi, Rumi's Masnavi, that I've now quoted twice. And there's an ant, a solitary ant crawling on it. And when I first saw this, I thought, okay, I think I know what this is referring to. There's a saying of the prophet that the sin of associating partners with God, of loving something like you should love God, is as subtle as a black ant crawling on a dark stone in the middle of the night, meaning you can't see it. I thought, oh, that's what it must be, because it's dark. There's a dark ant. It's crawling. It's subtle. There was a subtle problem with his psychology that didn't come out until this whole adventure that he needed to fix. But then, this is what happens when you research. I think I found the passage that this refers to in the Masnavi. So bear with me. I know I've already bored you, but this is for me very exciting. So out of sympathy, at least pretend to be interested. I found the passage in the Masnavi. And I'll read it and end here. The ant bearing grain becomes apprehensive because she is blind to the mound of dried husks. I'll explain. He's imagining, the poet Rumi, an ant frantically dragging some food, thinking, I need this food, I need this food, unaware that the ant is dragging it over a whole mound of food because it can't see it. It's too small. It can only see microscopic things. That's like us when we worry about life. We don't see that, oh my gosh, life is going to protect me. God's going to protect me. I'm going to be fine if I could just see the big picture. But we can't. We're too focused. Dragging that grain in worry and fear, for she never actually sees the rest of that plentiful chaff. Okay, doesn't see the rest of the food. The true owner, God, of the chaff then says, whoa. Like, whoa is an old way of saying, get out of here. Don't do that. May you cease to exist because of being blind to what's next to you. You can't even see what you have. Just the way Yusuf doesn't see his wife. He can't see her anymore. He can't see her beauty anymore. And she really cares about him. He falls in love with someone named Patty. Patty means fairy. Fairy in Persian literature, they're kind of like... how shall I say, they come and go, okay? It's not something you want to cling to. Of all our grain, you've only seen that one. You can only see that one grain that's in front of you because your soul is all wrapped up in wanting that one grain. You can't see all the other grain around you because you're focused. You're too focused. O gazer, and I think that's an important word. O gazer on the form of a speck of grain. Notice Saturn instead. Can't you turn your head up and see the heavens? You're so focused on what's beneath you, on just what you can eat, on the materialism. You can't see the heavens. You're like a hobbling ant. Go gaze upon Solomon instead. This is from a story of an ant and Solomon. I won't get into it, but basically it's in the Quran that Solomon is walking and he can actually understand the languages of animals. But you are not this body. The body that you identify yourself with, that's not you. You are that ability to see. You're not the eyes, the mouth. You are the ability behind it. Your soul isn't tied to the material, the mushy gushy stuff that you think is your body. It's your soul are the abilities behind it. Once you see that, then you go to the source of the abilities. You'll be rescued from body once you see the soul. That's when you'll be rescued from the body. A human is all vision. Now look at this. Think about our reading. Think about the gaze. A human is all vision. The rest is meat and skin. That's your whole purpose for existing, is vision. Everything else is just meat and skin. Don't get focused on it. Whatever one's eyes have seen, That is what one is. Whatever you see, that's what you are. You are what you see. How so? First of all, you absorb it, you make it part of your soul. Everything that you see, you make a part of your soul. Second, what you see depends on how you see. If you're focused on reality, you're going to see reality. Okay. If you're focused on externalities, you're going to see externalities. You're going to be shallow, and there you go. And film is the perfect medium for that. Why? It's just pictures moving along. It's all just form. So, in a way, the filmmaker is commenting on film as a medium of just simply form. There's a contradiction in what he's doing. Now you see why I'm so obsessed with the Willow Tree. Thank you for hanging in there.